All right, 7:01. Why don't we start the meeting? Is there any public participation? I hear none and see none. Shane, I made your co-host. Jason, also in case anything gets crazy, I made you one as well.
All righty.
Hey, good evening, everybody. So we'll start with the public safety. First on the agenda is a review of the previous minutes that were sent out yesterday for your review.
Do I hear a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes as written regarding
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Chip.
this meeting.
I second this meeting motion.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Are there any objections to approval of the minutes? Minutes are approved.
Great, thank you. Second item was the approval of invoices. We have 5 invoices this month totaling $47,343.80.
I move that we approve left field invoice number 13 for the sum of $10,000.
I will second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Chip,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Phil,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Janine.
Yes.
Did I miss anybody on the permanent building committee voting members? Tim, are you there? No, I guess not. It's unanimous.
I move that we approve HKT Architects invoice number 11-022023, the sum of $29,444.69.
I will second that.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Chip,
Yes.
Jason,
Yep.
Phil,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Janine,
Yes.
unanimous.
I move that we approve HKT Architects for supplementary services. Invoice number 08-022023 for the sum of $1,691.92.
Hey, Shane, just curious what the supplementary services above and beyond the basic service was?
This is for furniture consulting, Jason.
Ah.
So Janet's attended a showroom walkthrough and some meetings for that.
Okay.
I guess my question as well is why is that supplemental?
That's
Isn't that
not part
part
of
of
the
the
job.
contract?
Yeah, I know, right?
It's not part of their base scope of work, no.
So she got paid to go look at furniture. Okay.
Well, she's helping design it, this
I
coordination.
know,
you
I
it's-
know.
it's-
I figured that would have been
yeah,
included in their regular
I'm not sure if Janet's on. This is a bargain.
service.
This is a bargain. Thank you, Shane.
Thanks, Janet.
Yeah.
I'm fine with it. I'll second it. I was just curious.
In the future, though, any supplemental services we'd like to know beforehand.
Sure, well, this has all been approved previously. We have a line item in our budget for all of this, so there
Right,
is,
so just make sure we don't ever go over the budget.
no, that won't happen.
All right.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. Chip,
Yes.
Jason,
Yep.
Phil,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Janine,
Yes.
unanimous.
I move we approve bond building pre-construction number 6 invoice for the sum of $4,257.03.
I will second.
Any discussion?
That's a bargain too.
Don't bet on it. We're not voting on that, pal.
Mario's gonna lose his Christmas bonus for doing so little this month.
All right.
I hate to tell you, the only bargains here are the permanent building committee.
That's about it.
Any other discussion besides David's unnecessary comment? Chip,
Yes.
Jason,
Yep.
Bill,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Janine.
Yes.
All right, the
Move
next,
that we approve out of the advertising and printing line item invoice 215292-1 for bid docs online for the sum of $1,950.16.
I'll second that.
any discussion? Hearing none. Chip,
Yes.
Jason,
Yep.
Bill,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Janine.
Yes.
Okay,
Do we anticipate anything else coming out of this advertising and printing budget at this point?
We may need some copies when we start construction. We'll print some copies for the building inspector, the fire department. But we certainly won't want to exceed that budget we had of $5,000.
My question. Thank you.
Okay, just going through it. So the other item on tonight's agenda was, or maybe David, do you want to give us an update on the GMP? And then we'll go to this item.
Sure. So you all may remember that we carried an allowance in the initial GMP for HVAC based on the initial pricing we had and some expected value engineering, but we carried it as allowance because there was some negotiations and scope discussions that we had to have. We ended up having a lot of discussion. We came up with a scope of work that was close to the budget, but was still.
Well, sorry, David, if I can just maybe overall on the GMP where we've executed the GMP based on the approval last month. And you've been sending RTAs for certain trades. It just gives a rundown of what we've signed up.
Sure.
Where we are in terms of the overall GMP.
We're 88% bought out on a dollar value of the GMP at this point. Dario can run through but all the major trades, all the filed subs, drywall, concrete, site work, all the major items that we tend to, struggle to get lined up and get to the numbers we want to get to. We're actually been pretty successful. Steel's bought out. So again, we're about 88% on dollar value bought out. There's still maybe 6 or 7 trades we need to buy still, but they're all pretty simple ones to get behind us. So that's on tap for next week and the week after.
Hit the nail on the head. Bought out.
So I think the summary is we've bought out 88% of the subcontracts, and we're still tracking at the GMP level. We've had no
Did
busts.
we buy HVAC out yet?
So that included the HVAC. As David said, we went back and forth with NB Kenny with the help of GGD and Bond, and we were able to reduce that price through some negotiation and through some value engineering. So the allowance that was included in the GMP, we were able to buy them out for that amount.
I think it was actually over that, Shane. We just put we put the overage to our contingency
Correct. Sorry.
initially, because we knew we were tracking pretty well on some other buyouts. So we felt we would, even though we said we couldn't necessarily control what that number was going to do, we felt it was the right thing to do for the project to take it on our contingency initially, knowing that we were going to probably see some buyout savings. So it essentially washed out in the end. We're still tracking pretty close to our GMP number.
So once we get to 100%, when are we going to see an actual budget with the GMP?
So I think by the next meeting in the new year, Chip, we'll have that information. We'll be able to present that.
As of right now, we're tracking right on it. So,
Perfect.
So subsequent to the execution of the GMP, we had gone back and forth, and I forgot to say, we also had Joe Conway and Chris Pierce as part of those reviews with NB Kenny, with the VE and the negotiation, to make sure that they were okay with any of the items that we were proposing and that were accepted. They were okay with all of them. Subsequent to executing the GMP and executing the contract with NB Kenny, Joe came back and said that they had some money. One of the VE items was to eliminate the replacement of the HV unit. The HV unit is the fresh air unit in the parking garage that the police use below the building. Joe came back and said that he was able to fund that with money out of his budget. He spoke to Steve Mayo, who said it was all right to transfer that money from his budget into the project budget. So we were able to add back that HV unit into the scope of work for this. Because the GMP was already executed, it's not included in the GMP, and therefore we have change order number 1. This will not reduce our contingency. It will be funded through the money that Joe Conway is going to contribute to the project fund. So therefore, we're presenting this as a change order tonight, but it'll be funded through money that Joe Conway is going to transfer to the project to put that unit back in.
So Shane, when that money comes through, our budget will go up by $55,067.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's over and above the 12.1 that has been appropriated through the town meeting.
Okay.
Any other questions regarding the change order?
Yeah, I have a couple. It's Phil Renzi. What does GMP stand for?
Guaranteed maximum price.
Thank you. Value engineering, was it on this HV1, or are you saying value engineering for all the HVAC work that's part of this project?
It was just on the HV1, or so the value engineering was on the total HVAC package. It included equipment, it included controls, and some other items.
Because there was a number of items we were talking way back in the beginning about having to put on an alternate list, but then we ended up getting refunded for the project. So all the HVAC's back in the project, correct?
Correct. So most of the value engineering was controls work that we went through with Joe and Chris, and they were okay with reducing some of those control points and alarms. And the HV1 was one of those other equipment VE items we suggested. They were okay with it, but Joe subsequently was able to get some funding to pay for it.
Okay, and this isn't signed by HKT, but do they approve this? Has the PCO been signed off? There's usually a PCO and then a change order. PCO has been approved.
It hasn't. I mean, it only came out yesterday.
Okay.
We can sign the two of them at the same time. Ultimately, it's the change order that actually amends the contract. The PCO is just an acceptance, but not a contract change. Change order changes the contract.
Right. Okay. And HKT, obviously, do they approve this change order?
Yeah, we reviewed this. NB Kenny gave this breakout number when they came back with their VE.
It should be 2 or 3. Yeah, there you go.
So that was the bid. That was the savings. They also gave us this as an alternate, which we're now going to add back into the project. So the NB Kenny total contract value will be 2,318,400.
What are we not getting for $69,000? I just am curious about the value engineering. Is there anything of note besides controls for 70 grand that we're not doing?
No, it's primarily controls.
yeah, all the equipment stayed in. It's really just the bells and whistles the controls package had in it are now just more of a simplified controls, which seems like everybody's happy with, to not have
Got it.
it be overly sophisticated.
And Joe, you said Joe was part of all those, so he's
Joe,
Pierce,
Chris, Pierce, and Mike. I don't remember Mike's last name.
And the mechanical engineers were there. So GGD was working one by one, going through all these with them. So
Okay, I'm good. Thanks for answering my questions. Thanks.
Any other discussion on the change order? Hearing none. Chip?
Don't get used to this.
Oh, I got, wait a
Yes.
minute, have a motion for a second.
Yeah, can I make a motion that we accept change order 1? Might be the last one too. Dated 12/15/21 for the
Yeah.
sum of $55,067.
Yeah, I'll second that.
And I'll second that it's the last one for you, David. Any other further discussion? Chip,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Janine,
Yes.
unanimous. Anything else in the public safety bit, Shane?
No, just kind of an update. So I've been working with Bond and HKT, and I've spoken to the police department as well. So I think early in the new year, we'll probably do a kickoff construction meeting, start to go through these submittals now that we have subcontractors signed up, and start thinking about the sort of the phasing and the logistics, and how we're going to start construction when March comes. We'll start those meetings in January, so that we're ahead of the curve when we start construction in March.
And Shane, do you anticipate that these meetings are going to be weekly, bi-weekly, in person, on Zoom? What are your thoughts?
I think initially we can do them remotely, Chip. I'm sure there'll be a couple that will want to meet up there and actually walk the site physically with the fire department, the police department. The building inspector, Bond met with the building inspector last week. They were up at town hall meeting with him. So I think it'll be a combination, Chip. But we just, the reason we signed the GMP and we waited to March was that we could get everything lined up before we actually start construction. So we'll start those meetings.
And are we going to create a construction working group as we have in the past?
Yes.
We certainly can. I'll talk to Joe about that, who should be part of that. But, initially, I think probably bi-weekly, but once we actually get into construction in March, those meetings I would figure would be weekly.
Okay, any other questions or discussion on the public safety building? Okay. Before we get to the high school, I got an email today, and I assume Tom and John, you got one as well, that the three of us are up for reappointment to the committee. All right. Did you get
Yes.
yours, Tom and John? Did you?
I did.
Okay.
Yes, I did. Yep.
All right. Just making sure, because we had a problem in the past.
That means you have to send your resume and everything else that you want to be re-upped.
Correct.
All right.
happy holidays, everyone. Thanks.
Happy holidays.
Thank
Jane.
you.
Bye-bye.
You as well. Bye-bye.
Okay, see y'all.
You want to go to
You wanna
the
get Yep.
high school, Joe?
Yes, however, I forgot to do the closed caption here, and I'm trying to, let's see here. Okay, go ahead. I think I got it now. All right.
Okay. So first item is the approval of the meeting minutes from the last meeting.
I move that we approve the December 2nd meeting minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Chip,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Janine,
Yes.
minutes are approved.
Thank you. We have two invoices this month, totaling $123,346.08.
I move that we approve left field's invoice for the sum of invoice number 7 for the sum of $22,000.
I will second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Chip,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Phil,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Janine,
Yes.
unanimous.
So Shane, my quick question on the other one is two different pro pay codes, but the same invoice.
It's the same
Do we
invoice. yeah.
care?
No, so the total invoice, this is the basic service and they break out their supplementary separately on it. So it's one invoice for 101,346.08. But we just show it like this because
So we don't have to approve each pro pay. We can approve the
no, we
invoice.
can approve the total invoice, and when we submit the pro pays, we have to break them up to
Okay.
the
All right,
appropriate cost
that was
category.
my only question. I move that we approve SMMA's invoice number 56136 for the sum of 101,346.08.
And I will second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Chip,
Yes.
Jason,
Yep.
Phil,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Janine,
Yes.
unanimous.
Thank you. And then I think we can turn it over to SMMA. Let's stop sharing.
Okay,
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I had just the schedule and budget. Can go through quickly. So the budget, again, there's been no changes from last month. It's just been updated to show the invoices that have been approved to date, totaling 190,000. Our revised total budget remains the same, the line items in the overall budget. It's just been changed to show the invoices approved last month. Okay. And schedule, again, no changes to the schedule. We've been working through our focus groups and our leadership meetings to put together the educational visioning and programming. SMMA have been working on the initial space summaries we've talked about. We've started to look at the alternative designs. We'll give you an update on that tonight. So we're still tracking for submitting the PDP to MSBA on February 3rd.
So Shane, there were a number of topics that were asked to be brought back to the leadership group. One being WCAT, one being a larger field house, one being, what were the other ones? There were a couple, the
Track. No.
that's the larger field
District
house.
offices.
The district offices in-house versus not in-house. Where do we stand with all those discussions?
So the field house, right now we're carrying an 18,000 square foot gym. We've spoken to MSBA and they said that they would review that if we submit it. I don't think we're looking at some point, we were talking about a 30,000 square foot. I'm not sure that that's going to get past MSBA. They have a written policy that says that they won't allow a gym over 18,000 square feet. If it's something that the committee feels strongly about and wants to pursue 100% on the town's expense, we can certainly talk to them about that, but their written policy says that they will not allow a gym over 18,000 square feet. I can certainly send that policy around. The central office, we've been working with Doug and Tim O'Brien on sort of programming that, what the needs are, what the staff in there are. We got some information this week. So SMMA are including that in the space summary and including that in the building square footage. So that is in.
But I heard that was a non-starter for MSBA. that they do
Uh,
not want those offices in the high school. Didn't I
No,
hear
they-
that?
No, they won't reimburse for it. But they may, we need to submit it at PDP. It'll be a discussion. I think they will allow it eventually, ultimately, but they will not reimburse the cost of that space. So if it's 3,000 square feet, 3,400 square feet, they will not reimburse those costs for construction or design. Likewise, with the TV studio, we've gone back and forth. There's a couple of things that we're still looking at there. The possibility of a combined studio with the high school, if the high school integrates that into their curriculum. I don't believe that meeting has happened yet between the high school and the TV people, but we can certainly put that in. But right now we're carrying a standalone TV studio in our square footage. And again, that will not be reimbursed by MSBA.
But is that for WCAT or for both the high? Are we carrying two studios, one for the high school program and one WCAT space?
I don't have the space somewhere in front of me. I think there's about 2,000 square feet for the high school for a studio and maybe a classroom for TV. And we were carrying about 5,800 square feet for a WCAT studio. But there will be some discussion. I don't think they've happened yet, whether you can combine those two and perhaps reduce that square footage.
Shane, I say a couple of things on that. Tom Stapleton.
If the chair allows, yeah.
Tom?
Thank you.
Yeah, you had sent me an email. The board of directors has not discussed that yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically, last meeting we had was our annual meeting, and very little business was done at that time as far as this goes. It was electing officers and so on. But I did talk to, do I have a moment to talk?
No, if the board of directors has not made a decision on it, it was a very controversial issue many years ago, and I don't want to have it even begin unless the board of directors is on board on a combined studio.
Okay, then what I'll do is our next board meeting, we'll make this a priority.
Yep, please do.
I'll get back to you with what we.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on schedule or program?
So Shane, I want to follow back because I love beating a dead horse. Who talked about the indoor track and who made a decision that it's not an important thing for Wakefield?
Nobody made any decision. We've talked about a track within the 18,000 square foot gym, similar to what you have now.
That's not a competitive track.
Correct, it's not.
Okay, so how do we, who's the right group to have this conversation?
Well, I think this is the right group. If it's the desire of the building committee to pursue a 30,000 square foot gym with a full size regulation track, we can have those conversations with MSBA. I just don't think we're going to be successful.
It seems to me that we have one opportunity at this.
Yeah.
And there has always been from the track program, trying to figure out whether they go to the Lewis Fieldhouse down in Boston or how they run the great program that they do. I think it would be a shame to do all this programming and then at the end of the day, people to say, well, why do we have an 18,000 square foot track or field house where we could have done a turf track, multi-purpose, 30,000 square foot when we're building this new great complex? Why didn't we do that, or why didn't we look at it? So it feels to me that it will be a missed opportunity if we don't at least investigate it and get input from the superintendent, the town as a whole, Mr. Mayo, and the athletic director and track coaches, and at least to have, we had the conversation about a theater, and we're now including a second theater in town because we believed that it was important to the high school, and all these guys on the committee did as well. So now we've got another theater. I just don't think we're talking to the right people on this subject. And if it's enough, and I'm fine if it's, we talk about it and no, we don't need it, or no, we don't want it, or no, it's not desirable. But not to have the conversation, I think, is short-sighted.
Okay, well, I think that the conversations should start with this group.
Well, it just did.
Yeah.
It just did.
I've been talking about it for a month now, and nothing's happened.
Well,
Yeah, and Shane, Doug Lyons is on the phone. He's on this call, so I'd put some onus on Doug to go back and, if he doesn't know already, talk to those people, Chip, talk to the track team, talk to, some of the administration, and get a feeling from the school system whether or not they want to support a track. Because if MSBA is not going to pay for that, it's going to end up coming out of the town, and we're going to have to go and probably ask for that money, right?
well,
So.
correct. And
All
this is,
part of the budget. I
Oh,
mean, that-
absolutely, sure. So I want to make sure, everybody who needs to have those conversations now is having those conversations.
so I mean, there's two things. I think, we also need to talk to SMMA, who are doing the test fits to see, can we actually fit a
Right.
30,000 square foot gym with these options. We have three kind of locations to put a new school, all with their own constraints. So we can certainly look if they fit, and then this group will need to decide whether they think that this is worth bringing forward to the town, because this is going to be considerable expense, zero of which will be reimbursed by MSBA.
Is zero reimbursed, or is the difference between an 18,000 and a 30,000 reimbursed?
So we know MSBA will reimburse 12,000 square feet. We are going to try and demonstrate that the school program requires a field house or a gym of 18,000 square feet. If MSBA accept that explanation and we can demonstrate that through the educational program, they will reimburse it.
No,
They
you
will
didn't
not
answer-
reimburse.
You didn't answer my question.
Right.
My question is, if we're entitled to reimbursement money for a 12,000 or an 18,000 square foot gym, and if we build a 30,000 square foot gym, are we going to get the money for reimbursed for the 12 or 18, even though we built the 30?
You will, yes.
All right,
Okay.
that's what I wanted to know.
That's a big difference.
No kidding.
And the other thing, guys, I don't know how many of you have spent time in a field house that has an indoor track, but the infield's also a turf. So it's soccer, lacrosse.
Right, there's a
You know,
lot.
where
But
Yeah.
a 30,000 square foot building will not accommodate a 200 meter or even really a 160 meter track if that's the desire. So I would suggest, if that's truly the desire to provide even a non-competitive track, that the square footage of what that is and what the infield could, provide would get ironed out also by the design team to go with the conversations that are happening within the town.
So another item to consider here is the fact that if we put a field in the middle of the track in the field house, then we have no basketball courts. We have no volleyball courts. So we really need to pick one or the other. We have done 30,000 square foot gymnasiums that are field houses. Swampscott High School has an indoor track with basketball, volleyball courts inlaid within the track itself. We just recently renovated a 26,000 square foot field house in Somerville that was existing. Still has
If you're playing a basketball game, you can't run on the track.
the courts are actually independent, especially with the 30,000 square foot layout that we have in Swampscott. You can have basketball games going on in addition to running on the track itself. They're completely inboard. In that smaller 26,000 square feet, there is overlay, but you can have multiple sports at 30,000 square feet. You couldn't do the turf on sort of the inside, because it's really either or in terms of what you have to support.
I mean, I throw turf out there as whether it's a basketball court, turf. I just think it needs to be talked about.
I think we can absolutely talk about it. We have talked about the athletic spaces. The athletic director has been part of those conversations. And I think we're open to any number of different designs. The difficulty or the needle that we are trying to thread right now is that we are losing a gymnastics gymnasium, right? So that's a space that we're losing. So we're trying to reconfigure our spaces within what was initially a 12,000 square foot reimbursable space. We've increased it to 18, and we're still not all programs are going to be equally represented. So to have an 18,000 square foot gym or something that might be able to accommodate volleyball, gymnastics, basketball, and now track, would it be wonderful to have those things? I think it would be fantastic. But my working theory is that, and in dealing with other superintendents that have managed projects like this, that MSBA would only fund a fraction of that build.
Okay, but when you're talking about, and I'll use numbers that I have no idea whether they're right or not. Let's say it's a $200 million building, and we're talking about adding, and we get reimbursed for 45% of it or whatever, you know, and then you add another couple $1 million onto that for debt exclusion or however we fund it, it's minimal. It's really minimal. And to end up, you know, it's like your house, the list of, geez, I wish we could have, we wish we should have, how come nobody talked about that? We don't want those at the end of this project. Let's at least think big sky, and then if we have to whittle it down, we can whittle it down. But we should look at, Doug, how do we, you know, yeah, I know you're moving, you know, gymnastics, you know, you're losing a whole gym that they don't have to move stuff in and out. They're, you know, they're set up for their season. So I think you really have to look at, you know, and I use the term 30,000 because that's what was presented as needed. I haven't really looked at Ms. Martin's point of what's the right size for a competitive track. And then how do you fit these other things? You know, you can do curtains, you can do lots of creative things that create individual spaces for the different sports on the infield.
Yeah, Chip, I love the idea, and I think we're absolutely open to the conversation. I just, you know, my working assumption is it's a series of trade-offs, right? And then you're gonna have an equal number of people asking, why don't we talk about a rink? So, you know, I'm game. So I'm open to have this conversation and would love all of those things, including a bubble over the turf. Right. And so, but, you know, I will broach this with Brendan Kent, and we can talk about it at our next leadership meeting.
Great. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you for the input.
I think this is Phil. I think it would be helpful to know how big a building 30,000 square feet even is and what could go in it. I think it's in a bubble. I'm looking at some of the looking into some of the design options that were sent to us again. And I don't know how big this building would be and where it would even fit in any of the options. So, but to know what exactly what would fit in the building compared to what would fit in like a 12 or 18,000, what we'd actually be gaining to try to get that. It would be helpful for this whole conversation, I guess, for the whole school, you know, for Doug and his team, and for us to have like an actual conversation about it, because it's really has no idea. I have no idea what it means besides that it's 12,000 more square feet than 18,000 square feet. Like, I don't know what that gets us in the world. So I'd love a little more info, but I hesitate to add extra work. I don't know if that's extra cost that's not part of our project, and want to be mindful of that aspect too, of not spending too much, going down one road, spending a lot of money. You know, I don't know how much info we can get quickly to have another more educated conversation about this.
This is, Phil, this is the time to have it. This is what they are doing. This is the conversations that are taking place. There's no extra cost. This
Okay,
is
well,
developing
more.
our program.
okay,
So-
I need more info. I would need more info to have an actual conversation about it. Like, I have no idea what this even means in the world of track houses, like, 30,000. I'd really love to know what exactly it fits compared to what we're looking at in some of these design options and what those will fit. And then I think that would be a good place for me to be able to weigh out some of the differences, and if it's worth it to try to go to the town for more money.
So Phil, we do have a little bit of that in the options we're going to show in a little bit to just give you a sense of the scale. But it sounds like what we're hearing, this group telling your team, is that this is something you want to consider. I think it's time to maybe have a deeper conversation with the MSBA. And then it would be good to know exactly what the goals are. We can, investigate things, but we need a program to do so. So there's a bit of work to do on a number of fronts.
I'd like to ask just one question, if I could, please. A number of the schemes that we've been shown have the field house existing. And now we're talking about the state reimbursing for 12,000 square feet. Is there any possibility of the existing 17,000 square feet being added on to the 12,000 square feet that the state will pay for?
No, they won't reimburse anything over 18,000 square feet.
No, but we also, it was said that they would reimburse you for 12,000 square feet if you decided to go bigger.
Whether it's renovation or new construction, the maximum is 18,000 square feet. So you can't take an existing gym and add 12,000 square feet to that and say reimburse us for the new part and we'll just keep the old. It doesn't work like that.
Okay.
I think that's what you're asking, right?
That's exactly what I was asking.
No, they won't allow that.
All right.
So can I, Shane, just to clarify then, on these other projects that have happened, mentioned Somerville, Swampscott, were they not reimbursed at all for their field houses, or were they reimbursed for a percentage of the 30,000?
You're reimbursed. So the last one I did was Belmont. They had I think it was almost 50,000 square feet, including a swimming pool. MSBA reimbursed 18,000 square feet of that. They prorated the other 32,000 square feet, took that out, including the OPM fees, including the architect fees. So they prorated across the board. It's not just the construction costs that they won't reimburse. It's all the soft costs also that would be prorated.
Okay.
In that job, I tried to argue with MSBA that the gymnasiums are cheap to build and they shouldn't prorate it against, more expensive space. And they said, no, that's our policy. We prorate it. If your building is $600 a square foot, we're going to take, in this case, it would be 12,000 multiplied by 600, take that out and then add a percentage for soft costs as well.
Okay. Well, I think that's how we should maybe, just as we discuss this, stop saying it's not allowed by MSBA, because it's allowed. We just have to know that we're going to have increased costs for the project for it if we make the decision to do this.
Well, it may not be allowed either. We have to have the conversation, because MSBA will not, it's a conversation we need to have with MSBA. Towns cannot just say, well, we'll take your money, to build what you allow, but we're just going to pay for whatever we want ourselves.
But Shane, they allowed it in Belmont.
Well, it was a renovation. It was an existing gymnasium that they renovated.
Right.
It wasn't a new build.
So I think the important thing, if I can summarize real quickly, since I'm the one that brought the elephant into the room. If we can have Doug and his team figure out athletically, because it doesn't kind of fit into the educational realm, what they need. Will 18,000, and I don't know what the square footages are, but will 12, will 18, or will 30 do it? And if it needs, and if the goal is to have something bigger, and that's their desire, then we should ask MSBA, would they consider it? And then SMMA can even figure out whether they can stick it onto a building or not. I mean, I get it's a big space.
So I think
for you guys that didn't go through the Galvin, the theater at the Galvin was totally funded by the town. Okay, the theater in a middle school is not allowed. So this whole process we've gone through once already, where, and that theater was not an inexpensive space. It's got great acoustics. Someday we'll use it again. But you know, so we've done this, and that was a discussion because we, you know, fortunately a theater is allowed in a high school, so we're not looking at that, but we're still going to have to spend 45 cents on the dollar or whatever to get a theater at the high school, which people feel is important. So I'm not afraid of the budget stuff, because the numbers get so big, it really becomes pennies when you look at it all. But the right program, both athletically and educationally, is very important, because we got one shot at it.
So excuse me. Yeah, so I think the next step is, you know, we had a meeting with Brendan this week. I think the next step will be for Doug to speak to Brendan again. You know, we'll probably need to get together with him, Matt or Helen, if you can start, you know, researching what a competitive size gymnasium and track would be. And we'll see if we can fit that on the sites, on the 3 locations that we're looking at.
If it's important to the school, and it may not be, but it certainly, I see tons of use, both from a town perspective as well as a school perspective, from a bigger space rather than a smaller space.
Okay, so I'm not sure. Yeah, so we'll talk to Doug, we'll talk to Brendan, and we'll look at it with SMMA and see what we can actually fit there compared to what the town would like to right size this field house.
Those sound like the right action item, Shane. Thank you.
So that was our schedule, and then just I'd included a list of meetings to get us to the PDP. And we're going to go to the school committee in early January to give them an update. We're in the process of scheduling some more focus groups. Our next building committee meeting will be January 13th. We have a public forum tentatively scheduled for January 20th. And we had talked about maybe doing that as a PBC SBC meeting if we need an extra meeting before our meeting on the 27th, at which time we'll be looking for an approval to submit the PDP to MSBA. And then I've listed some meetings at preferred schematic. We'll revisit that once we get PDP done. So with that, I'll hand it over to SMMA to look at the options. Are we all done with programming, or I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more while we look at the options?
Yeah, I think there'll be more discussion when we look at the options.
Okay, yep. Does Matt have screen sharing ability? Shane, would you be able to do that for us?
I can do
Or
it.
Joe? Thank you.
I can do it, maybe.
You closed captioned us. I think you can
Sounded
do it.
pretty
No,
confident,
like-
Joe. So I think
Yeah,
you can pull this one off.
I'm getting there. I think it's all set for him.
Yep. Here we go. Yep. Let's switch our screens. Does that look better to everybody?
Looks great.
All right. So just really quickly, agenda. So we are going to go through a conceptual site design, building design, alternatives, and talk primarily about the updates that we've made since the last time. So we're not going to spend quite as much time on them. Overall framework has remained the same, but we do have some updates to share. And then Helen's going to walk through the start of the evaluation criteria that we're putting together, the device that we're going to use to evaluate those different options. And then we'll close with Shane and a little bit of discussion on just benchmark cost data in the market, so we can start to get an understanding of order of magnitude of what we're looking at just from a dollar per square foot construction basis. So To start off, before we jump into the options, we just wanted to circle back on the existing site analysis, because this is where we actually have some updates that are impacting our thinking in the evolution of where we're going. Primarily through the additional information that we've got in terms of wetlands. So we have had our wetland consultant out doing flagging, and what they've done for us is really identified the perimeters of the wetlands here at the southern edge of the site, just at the edge of Walsh Field here. And you can see the wetlands themselves are located sort of the smaller footprint here. Then expanded from that, we have the wetlands buffer. So this is a 50-foot buffer away from that we're looking to preserve as clear from building footprint. So what it does is it starts to reduce our available site area that we can work with. So along Walsh Field, the southern edge, that was useful information. It was not too dissimilar from what we were showing previously. To the east of Beasley Oval, however, you may recall that previously we had sort of a blue area here that was mostly contained to the area directly to the east of Beasley Oval. The wetlands itself, you can see right through here, has taken on sort of the form of the country of Italy. We have the boot or the dog leg that's now sticking out back towards Hemlock Road. So all of that is protected wetland area. And then we have the 50-foot buffer that extends beyond it as well. So when we get to the Beasley Oval options, the new construction option on Beasley Oval, there will be some adjustments that we've made to steer clear of that 50-foot buffer. It is worth remembering the fact that, yes, we can replicate up to 5,000 square feet of wetlands if we choose to potentially, say, take off the edge of this boot, if you will, and try to build it. We'd have to replicate twice the amount. So we have to replicate 10,000 if we take away 5,000, and it has to be contiguous to this wetland area. So that would be something that would have to be taken into consideration. It's really not a large amount of area. 5,000 square feet is more or less what I'm hovering around here. So it doesn't give us a lot of freedom in terms of relocating a portion of this wetlands if we wanted to. All right, so that's primarily the updates that we have in terms of the existing condition site analysis. You will see that we've updated the graphics a little bit to try and improve the clarity and the level of specificity that we have in all of the options. And just as a reminder, we have the two groups of options that we're looking at, both the straight renovation code upgrade, then which is the number one. Then we have the two options, which are all of the addition renovation options. And again, just big picture, the three options are those that are proposing a new construction on the Beasley Oval. And then the four options are new construction on Walsh Field. So we won't spend too much time on the code upgrade. Again, this is a basic, really a benchmark type of option to just look at the cost associated with renovating the existing building in place. No one ever proceeds with the benchmark option, the code rental update. It's really there just for community-wide understanding. So 2A, this original addition renovation, we have clarified a bit in terms of what the proposed addition square footage is here, which is located towards the center of the footprint, the new auditorium, new classroom space. We are suggesting in this option again that we're preserving some of the existing footprint, introducing light wells to improve the existing qualities of the existing construction towards the northern end of the existing building, renovating the existing 17,000 square foot gymnasium, and really reclaiming some site area towards Farm Street. This option does also show the realignment of Hemlock Road towards improving the intersection there with Farm Street. And let me go back really quickly. We are here at the top of the screen estimating what the rough percentage of existing to be renovated versus demolished portions of the footprint will be. As we move forward, we will fine tune these numbers because they will factor into the reimbursement associated with the addition renovation square footage. MSBA does give additional reimbursement points for the renovated square footage itself of the program space, not just the footprint. So we're trying to give you a little bit of data to understand the ad reno schemes a bit more here. So the 2B addition renovation, again.
Excuse me, on 2A, could you explain that again? I didn't understand that.
In terms of the reimbursement portion. Yeah. So the renovated square footage is eligible for an additional 2 percentage points of reimbursement on it in terms of the square footage that is renovated. The new square footage is the same reimbursement percentage that has already been agreed to, but it's an incentive essentially to renovate existing buildings. MSBA will fund additional.
So Matt, I think it's a sliding scale of up to 5%.
For the it's 5% of the overall
right.
Program square footage.
So sliding scale up to that.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll double check on it.
Yeah, and I think it's just it would factor out here to about 2% in
right
that general
on this scheme. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'll move along. This 2B addition renovation option, similar in terms of how it approaches things. It's more of an infill of the existing courtyard. There is slightly more renovated footprint that we're looking at here in terms of existing construction. And it is the 1970s wing construction that we're primarily looking to renovate here. Again, looking to introduce some light wells to improve the conditions of the existing space. And again, looking to renovate the existing gymnasium.
One question, does 2A and 2B, does that preserves the field house and the area where WCAT is located?
That is correct. Yes,
okay,
Joe.
thank you.
So 2C, and then we'll look at 2D again, is really a more limited renovation scope that focuses primarily on the existing field house itself. I know we had some discussions about whether these options previously could also include WCAT. But as you can see here in terms of where the new relocated Walsh Field would go, it does overlap that same footprint. So this is really limited to the gymnasium itself and potentially the locker rooms as well. But this particular scenario proposes to build the remainder of the program area as new across from a realigned Hemlock Road further to the south of the site, primarily on Walsh Field. Because of this, there would need to be some type of bridging element that crosses across Hemlock. .2D then, similar in terms of the only renovation area here is the gymnasium and then the locker rooms. And then the new construction in this scenario is immediately adjacent to the renovated gymnasium, all contiguous with no bridge over. This would require the realignment of Hemlock Road. And I think as we talked about last time, there's this type of realignment would certainly be challenging, but we're keeping it on the table as an option for consideration and understanding. All right, so let me just get through all of these and then we can circle back on any of the topics that we want to discuss a little bit further. So now 3A, which is new construction on Beasley Oval. This is the first option that you can see has really been impacted by the additional wetland survey that we did, and then the buffer area that you can see pushing out. So we're now referencing here the Grafton High School model school. So this is the model school footprint. It has been tailored and really fits better given the footprint of the wetlands that we're having to deal with adjacent to the oval. But building new construction here, relocating Beasley Oval to the location of the existing building after this new construction would be complete. 3B then, is a completely new build construction tailored to fit on this particular site. We have elongated out the footprint of this particular option as well, again, to avoid the extension of the wetlands. You can see it's tight up into it, but we do think it is viable in terms of a footprint at least. In this layout, Phil, is we can start to get into giving you an understanding of what the 18,000 square foot gym can hold. You can see that there are 3 practice courts that can be accommodated in the length of an 18,000 square foot gym. Typically, then there is also a main competition court that is either centered in the overall volume or centered within 2 of these courts. So that's generally what the 18,000 square foot gym would provide. We have started to dash in what an enlarged footprint would be. I will admit that this is not the 30,000 square foot extension in terms of the gymnasium. If you can imagine 18,000 square foot, we're roughly double that if we're going to 30,000. So the extension would have to be out much further. And so there would be some challenges in terms of thinking about parking in this particular instance as we're getting closer to the Blast Burnett field. Option 3C then, similar in terms of the new build construction. We have a different location for the gymnasium on this particular scenario, and slightly different site circulation as well, but similar in terms of the overall approach and how this scheme is also now pulling away further from that wetlands to be able to get the footprint in. Option 4A then is the first of the new construction options that fits onto Walsh Field. This particular option is again a model school. This is our North Middlesex model school footprint laid in here. So you get a sense here of the 18,000 square foot gymnasium in this scenario. Again, would be challenging if you start thinking about doubling that roughly in terms of access to parking and loading, which would be accessed off of Hemlock here. This does show a realigned Hemlock Road coming through, a drop off of that. And then we have relocated Walsh Field as well as Dobbins Courts to the spot where the existing school is. So this is the flip that occurs in this scenario. 4B then is again completely new construction, but tailored to fit on the site, not a model school. The footprint here has again been adjusted slightly to work with the wetlands buffer that we need to preserve. But the remainder of the site strategy here is similar. And lastly, 4C, again, new construction. This has been adjusted in terms of the reimagining of Hemlock Road to incorporate a circular drop-off element that would just help to really ameliorate traffic patterns coming through Hemlock and school traffic as well. Additionally, this particular option would envision entirely pedestrian commons extending from the school out to the field complex without the intent of driving vehicles through it on a regular basis, though of course that there would be opportunity to bring emergency vehicles through there if needs be. I think that's the overview of the options and the updates that we've made to them. Happy to have some additional discussion on any of the things that you've seen.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I have one question. Well, you know me, I have many questions. But Chief Sullivan last time said it would be very important to have a road that goes around it. None of these iterations show that. Do you remember that comment, or have
Yes.
you guys started contemplating that?
Yep, no, we definitely heard that comment. We actually had our site focus group subsequent to the last building committee meeting. I myself was not there, but Mike Dowhan with our office, who I think is on with us, was, and there was discussion with the chief about that particular circulation road. I don't know, Mike, if you want to just elaborate on what the discussion was.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, I don't know necessarily that he said that there had to be a perimeter access drive of full 360-degree access. I think as we move along in these things, we'll see where we can get vehicular access. And what we try to do a lot of times when we're dealing with issues like that with fire access around a building, what we'll try to do is incorporate that access with other program elements so that it's not just a road or a moat of pavement around your building. We'll incorporate it with something else. I'm not sure that in some of these instances, because of our proximity to these wetland resources, we may or may not be able to get permanent roads all the way around the buildings anyway. And I think the chief was aware of that, and I think he understands that that may be the case if we build on either Beasley or the baseball field or on Walsh Field. So we're certainly cognizant of it, though.
The second comment I would have is that we started talking about, these big squares. We talk about athletics, we talk about the school, and we now have dark gray that says parking. Have we taken any steps further to understand how many spaces we currently have, how many spaces we need, and what does this thus represent to that? Have we gone to that level yet?
Yeah, so there are 306 existing parking spaces on the campus. That does not include the spaces in front of Woodville, thank you, and that does not include the spaces across from Landry. 306 spaces are on the perimeter of the existing building. So if you think about parking, and at this level, this is the way we're handling it, we think about parking in terms of how many square feet do you need to accommodate, say, 306 spaces. You need about 98,000 square feet of paved area to accommodate 300 to 310 parking spaces. So in all of the options that you see, those grayed areas that are labeled as parking, the amalgamation of all of them together comes out to about 98,000 square feet. They're different on each one, of course, but they all, when you add them all together, the area square footage is about 98,000 square feet. So that's how much you have right now. What we have not had yet is a conversation about how much you want. Okay, those are two different things. So we're just basing this off of what the existing condition is on the campus right now.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Martin, you had a question, Liz?
Yep. So in the options that we looked at, how many allow, given wetlands constraints, parking constraints, grading constraints, allow for a 30,000 square foot gym?
It's a tough question to answer, and I understand I'm being mildly evasive by not answering it, but you can see in the, if I can get the slides to advance here or reverse. So where we've drawn it in or started to dash in sort of where an extension would start to occur or be conceived of, there are going to be challenges with wherever it happens. And unfortunately, we don't have a limitless site that has no boundaries to it. So towards the south here, potentially in this particular scenario, there is grade that happens in between Hemlock and then down to the oval elevation, most likely where the gymnasium would be sited. And so as we get closer to that, it would be fairly challenging to try to make up that grade that quickly and or costly. I mean, there may be retaining walls, that type of thing involved to allow that to happen. If I back up again here, extending out in this direction would make it nearly impossible to have access to sort of this sort of postage stamp of a parking area that would remain. And so it would force us to be looking for parking areas elsewhere. Again, on this sort of steeply sloped area that occurs in this area. I don't think we're at the point yet where we can say that it's impossible on any of them, but there will be challenges with every single option in terms of getting on, just given the sheer size and scale of the larger field house.
And just
Matt, I'm sorry, this slide might be a good opportunity to mention that there will be a third area of resource and buffer right there where she's pointing right now. Yeah. So as you know, there's a stream that comes from the south, is channeled underneath the building and then daylights again north, just to the side of Burnett Field. We don't have those flag GPS locations yet, but we're hoping to get them very soon. So then the next set of these drawings that you'll see, you're going to find another resource area with another buffer zone in that location over there.
So just if I could jump in too, Matt, where you show that the hatched line here representing additional square footage, depending on the program, and if we want to put in a regulation track, it may not just be about extending to, east or west. You may have to extend north, right, to fit that. So when we say 30,000 square feet, it's not necessarily making the gym wider. We may have to make it longer, right? So it may not fit north to south, even if it fits east to west at 30,000 square feet.
Right. And as part of the next iteration of these, we'll overlay an actual track on this, so you can sort of see the scale of that and what the footprint of it ends up being. I think it's very helpful to see the 3 basketball courts. So likewise, it will be useful to see the indoor track here.
As you increase your athletic program in the footprint, are you forced to increase like your locker count and trigger like plumbing fixtures and all of that, or you can just say this is what our locker room facility is to support that square footage?
Yeah, I think the locker room discussion and decision will really be based on conversations with Doug and his staff.
So you aren't forced, like they don't say
No.
like, if you have these programs, these are what you need to, okay, so that's great. All right.
It's, really driven by the number of students, and then the lockers and the showers and plumbing fixtures are really driven by the number of people that would be in the space. But we would most likely have, as we do on just about every project, discussions with the code officials to understand that at 30,000 square feet, you wouldn't be filling that with people, one person for every 7 square feet. It would be just a ridiculous number of people to get in there. So we would work to tune it on the plumbing fixture side regardless.
And then I have one more question, I'm sorry. For the renovation schemes and the reimbursements, does the design team dictate how much renovation you will do, or is that also, there's probably a laundry list of things that you can and cannot do in a renovation, I'm assuming?
So we will evaluate the existing spaces to see how suitable they are to house the new program that we've developed and to support 21st century education and all of the goals that have been laid out from the visioning, the ed plan. So some spaces will easily support creation of those new spaces. Some are going to be very challenging or impossible to renovate to achieve that. You'll see that in most cases we are targeting the later vintages of construction because it is a steel structure. It is a bit easier to try to improve that for seismic codes and some of the more important pieces that the renovation has to address. But there's still significant cost associated with that. It's really a back and forth process to understand how it works with the overall layout of the addition and how suitable the existing structure and spaces are to support the new program.
But you're allowed to go all the way back to the structure and kind of start at that point. It's not just
yes.
okay. All right. Thank you.
Eric Colambioso, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I appreciate the challenges of the site. And as you were flipping through the options, I was taking note of locations of parking. And I think we should strive to locate parking, not only look at the quantity, but location. And in my mind, it's important to have parking near certainly the school and particularly auditorium and gymnasium proximity, but also easily oval. So and some of the schemes, it's not bad. If we look at this one right now, it looks like the majority of the parking is sort of wrapped around the back edge of Walsh Field, which, just doesn't put parking where it needs to be. So I just wanted to point that out.
All right, thank you. Janine?
Yes, actually, this follows up just what I was going to ask. Is this designed, or all these designs keeping in mind what I believe is currently being used by the Woodville for their drop off? I believe they currently are going through in front of the high school, and if that's not the way it is, maybe it's something different now, but that's the way I remember it being. And if we're changing the way we're laying out this, is Woodville going to be left with a really awkward situation, or is that all being thought about at the same time?
I think it's our job to make sure it's thought about. We have to be considered. It's not a given that it's going to remain exactly the same as it is today, but whatever we come up with needs to be viable for Woodville, as it would be for.
Yeah, because right now I believe they drive through the front where all the parking is. Like in this scenario, 2C looks like it wouldn't even have a drive-through for them any longer. And that's if maybe they're coming up with a new scenario for Woodville. And that parking on that right-hand side of Walsh is what they drive through to do their pickup. So they're really tight there too. And I just hate to see us do a great job with the high school and then create an unforeseen problem with the Woodville.
I think.
Go ahead, Ben. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say for both Janine and Eric's comments, I think it will be a good parlay into the next portion of the presentation when we're talking about evaluation criteria. So those may be things that we want to really track for each of the options and be able to sort of give them a score, if you will, in terms of how responsive they are on particular topics.
Okay, are there any other questions regarding these options? Okay.
All right, so with that, I will stop sharing, and I think I'm going to hand it over to Helen, if I'm not mistaken.
May I share, Joe? Or,
let me see.
Or I think Shane has a PDF of this too. He could potentially also pull it up.
You got it, Helen.
Okay, thank you. Find the screen. There we go. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. So this was included in your packet yesterday sent by Shane. This is our first pass at a matrix that starts to include criteria that we have typically used on other projects, you know, some basic things. First and foremost, we want to make sure that whatever we're doing is meeting the educational needs of the program, right? So we've divided this into categories. The first, some educational aspects. Second being about the building itself, community and community use. And I am open to, you know, there's mixing and matching here, right? Some of these really do overlap in terms of what's truly a site issue versus, you know, phasing issue, right? Which thing happens first that's causing you to evaluate something in a certain way. But this is a first pass of some criteria we would suggest or use as a starting point to begin to fill out this matrix together. So this becomes pretty useful tool when you lay everything out together. You need to have the right criteria, the right inputs. But we're calling this the stoplight approach, right? And just taking a very simple pass at if something is considered favorable, we'd shade the square rectangle green, neutral, no real positive or negative, versus a red would be an unfavorable effect. So for instance, the existing building, the code upgrade, obviously you'd get a red here because it's not meeting the educational needs of the program that's being worked on right now. So this is, again, a first pass. We definitely want your input. I think I have purposely left parking off. I know for sure we're going to want a few lines of parking related criteria, especially based on what we've heard even tonight and before about the right amount of parking is sort of the baseline. And then parking where it's needed maybe would be a refinement and would get its own row in this matrix. So we're welcome. We can go through one by one. I am happy to take suggestions both on and offline. Yeah, Janine has her hand up. Oh,
No, that was from
Yeah,
before.
she had heard up before.
okay, okay. Great. So any,
Is this something that we would provide it to you or?
we want to work on it with you. So we can certainly take a first pass of what we think is favorable, unfavorable. Some of these things may not have enough information for you to perhaps fill this in yourself. But in discussion together, we can certainly come to agreement about which things we sort of privilege as being important for this project.
And when do you anticipate doing that?
We're going to keep going on this. I
No,
think
to have to go through all of it. We're still talking about various options here.
yes, yeah, this is going to continue to evolve into January. So I think what we'd like to do is to get the criteria right first.
So it may take a little time, but do we want to go through them quickly and decide whether to keep them, take them out, add some? I think ultimately, we'd like to review these, Joe, with you and the committee. And then at that meeting on January 27th is when we'll need to finalize this so that we can make recommendations as to which options we want to recommend to MSBA or carried forward to PSR.
This seems to me to be a huge not huge, but a timely undertaking, like a couple hours to fill in all these blanks.
I would agree.
And I think we should probably know we're coming into that to do it. So I think we should set up another meeting to do this. Not try to squeeze it in tonight and to have.
No, I'm not suggesting we fill in the green, yellow, and red tonight, Chip, just that B column to see if these are the criteria upon which, that we want to leave in there. So meet educational needs for students, that should stay. So that's from optimal configuration. Do we want that in or should we take it out? Is there something else we should put in there? I'm not suggesting we fill in the colors tonight. That's what I'm suggesting we will need to do by the 27th. But
perhaps you email this matrix to everybody and let them recommend it. If nobody wants to sit through and go through each of these, people can recommend them. And then when you get back together, you can just talk about the final criteria. And also in the past, what we've done is we've assigned a numerical value to the red, green, and yellow, and let everybody fill it out. And then we take those and combine it into one compiled version by using the numerical value to determine what each cell should have in terms of a red, green, or yellow color.
Does the high school and the educators there get to comment on this first before it comes to the permanent building committee?
Sorry, say again, Liz.
Does leadership at Wakefield Memorial High School get to go through column B first to sort of give their red, yellow, and green rankings, and then does that then get evaluated by the combined committee? Or are they done simultaneously and then?
I would expect it's done simultaneously, that there is members of the.
So there is a separate exercise that's being done at the high school level where the educators
No,
are.
there's
Okay.
not. There's educators and people from the school department and the school committee on this building committee.
Okay.
So I think that's who would do this. We wouldn't do a separate one with them. Ultimately, it's this committee that will decide that.
Okay.
Eric, you on your hand up?
Yeah, seems to me that not only getting the criteria correct, but maybe even applying a weight to them, because some criteria is going to be, important to take note of, but there'll be other criteria that is really important that we want to emphasize.
Yep.
And then as far as filling it out, I think it's a great idea to let everybody take some time on their own to fill it out, and then we can get averages from everyone's own review.
But what's the process? So say we rank a bunch of stuff that we think is really important, but Doug and people at the high school are like, well, that's just completely out in left field. Pardon the pun. Like how does that, how is that back and forth happen?
Can I just say something? I think to start with, the stoplight approach is just to start to weed out some of the options. But as we narrow down the options, we will do a similar matrix that has that weights the categories based on priority. And that will result in, a further, more in-depth analysis of the options that we narrow down to.
Essentially, isn't this taking these 11, 12 options down to 4 or 5? Isn't that exactly what you're doing?
That's what we want to get to at the end of PDP. So, our PDP will say to MSBA, we've reviewed 11 options and here's the 4 or 5 we recommend we carry through to PSR.
Shane, is this criteria, isn't that what it's doing, taking the 11 or 12 and getting them down to like 4 or 5?
Yes.
It'll start to become clear, hopefully, when you look at the matrix and you can see the whole thing.
Yeah, a
Where
bunch
the
of red, a
green,
bunch of yellow. yeah.
exactly, where the weight of the green starts to fall. I'm wondering if it makes sense to take one option and just run through a column together. I know we don't all want to spend hours on this, but it's a suggestion.
I would rather have some time to go through these, decide if it's the right criteria, if anything's missing, if anything shouldn't be there, and then set up a separate meeting to just spend some time going through this as a team.
I would suggest that every member of the committee review these various options and various descriptions that you would like to, if there's any that you would like to add, that you would send it to Shane. If there's various criteria that you would like to add, send that to Shane, and then review this criteria on your own with some time on the various options, right?
Yep.
Is there a limit to how many selections we can greenlight versus how many we have to? Okay.
Oh, you mean at the end of this phase of PDP?
Well, in order to get to PDP, what is your expectation for us to whittle it down to? Because it would not be helpful to you if everyone put green on everything.
Exactly true. Yes, by the end of preliminary design program, we hope to be down to 3 or 4 options as we move into the preferred schematic report.
And so 3 or 4 options means educational, building, like 3 or 4 options of the gray item?
No, options, actual numbered options that you saw presented here.
That are fully green, top to bottom from education.
No, just heavier weighted green.
Heavier weighted green, exactly.
Okay.
No one option is going to have it all.
Got
and
it.
I assure you, there are criteria missing. There may be criteria on here that you will find unimportant, right? That's not something that's important to the community. So, we take it off.
And so not to get back to this, but so now that 30,000 square foot footprint and what that does to these options will directly impact probably how we rank them.
valid
Right.
point.
Well, that could be a good one that we add here. You know, might be an item that says, you know, can accommodate a 30,000 square foot
It's already on
field
there.
I
house
got
with,
it.
with track.
Okay.
That one I
thank you.
got. I got
All
Already
one.
on
right,
there.
so exactly.
Thank you, Joe. Yes, it's here.
Already on there. Take a look at it, Adam, Shane. One of the areas that we don't have is, we don't have the information on is obviously cost.
Yep.
Right?
We
And-
won't have that until, right,
Yeah.
January. That's
Okay.
right. So this will be a work in progress.
All right.
But shouldn't cost be immaterial at this point?
I would say not, because you could have big swings in cost.
Yeah,
But again,
Sorry?
we want to get the building that we want to get. You can always VE it.
Well,
Yeah,
this
Right.
first
Who-
phase
who
is
am I
really
to
supposed
say-
to be focused on the educational program and how
Correct.
to implement the educational program.
Correct. And then we worry about cost after that.
well, didn't Helen, you say the cost is gonna be available in January?
Yes.
All right.
It'll be
well,
But it
very-
will
go
be
back and
once we narrow it down to 3 or 4, you're not going to have cost on 11 of them
We are going to have
we-
numbers on 11. Yes.
yes.
because you're doing it just as square footage costs, right?
You got it. That's correct, Chip.
Okay,
Okay.
you're doing it at that big
All right.
ballpark. You're not doing,
So
okay.
big ballpark, what we will provide to our estimators is these drawings with square footages, renovation square foot, new square foot, and descriptions of the site improvements on each one. And
And then
that's
they'll
what
they'll make an estimate from that.
correct.
Okay,
Going forward, do we assume that every one of these 11 get rid of, you know, the code compliant one? But all the other options meet the educational goals?
Yes, that would be, I don't see a reason why it wouldn't unless one of the model schools. So I am suggesting here with yellow that the model school may not get you everything that you want because of the
Okay, so
limitations
to
of
me, that
using.
would be for me, that would be a red. And how do we know whether it does or doesn't?
we'll have that discussion in January, right?
Yeah,
Well,
and we need
to have
to,
that before we before we fill this out.
so for now, let's leave it yellow, but we need the space summary completed, Chip. And that
Okay.
is still in
Okay.
process.
Okay.
Okay,
But you
All right,
get
cool.
it. That's the exercise.
all right, and we'll start the exercise on the next meeting on the 13th.
Or do we want to have a separate meeting for those that want to participate in this?
I would think it would be more appropriate for a separate meeting.
I do too.
It's gonna take some time.
So you're suggesting a
Yeah.
smaller group from the.
Well, it
the
may not be
building?
small, it may be everybody joining.
Everybody,
But it's open to everybody, but it may be a smaller group.
everybody would be invited.
Yeah,
Yep.
but it would just be a night that we know we're just talking about this. We're not doing invoices. We're not doing, we're
Right.
very focused.
Right,
Right.
we just do
We're not
the,
talking about the public safety building. We're just doing the high school evaluation of the 11.
So,
And we're
so I think
meeting
that well,
we're
the,
meeting on the 13th.
I think if we do it
Yeah.
the 25th of December, it will be a very small.
Extremely small.
Yeah. Ho, ho, ho.
so I think the first step is to establish the criteria. And that will be, meaning in of itself. And then the second step is to evaluate the options based on that agreed upon criteria.
No, I think the best thing to do, Shane, is that this goes out to everybody. If everybody has any additional criteria they'd like to add, it should be sent to you. And then we have a separate meeting, just going through each and every criteria. It may take a couple, an hour and a half, 2 hours, just to go through each and every one. Does that make sense for people?
I guess my question is, I know we aspire to be, this has to be a LEED building and we aspire for net zero. And so who fills in this matrix that tells us which of these options are best to provide those types of things? I mean, we have experts that tell us which of these options are most efficient and which ones provide us the best kind of efficiency and that type of thing.
That would be done at the meeting that we hold when we go through the whole criteria.
But
No,
who
and then
decides that?
done.
Is that, it's not done by committee, certainly experts.
The
decide.
The design
architects
group.
do.
The design group.
The architects.
Yeah,
Okay.
some of it'll be obvious at this stage of development conceptually. But otherwise, I think we have to assume everything, all things will be equal from a sustainability and system standpoint, Raymond, because we just don't have enough information yet in the design.
I thought the sites were important as far as sustainability.
Yep, they are in terms of
Okay.
how
I'd like to
layouts
see
can
that
happen.
reflected. I'd like to see that reflected, but kind of,
Mhm. Yep.
we were talking about a 50-year, looking ahead 50 years, right? So.
Yep. Okay.
All right, when do we're meeting next on the 13th,
Correct, yeah.
and would it make sense to meet Doug? Is Doug still on?
I am, Joe.
When, if we could meet on a Tuesday, would that work? The Tuesday, not the night of the school committee?
So we meet on the 11th and the 25th, Joe. What day are you thinking of?
Would that Tuesday, the 18th work for people to go through this? And
I
then
think we
we'll
should do
have
it
a meeting
before
on,
I think we should do it before the 13th.
Yeah, well, then we would do it on the 13th and meet again on the 18th, perhaps.
Or the 11th.
we can't do it the 11th,
The
that's
school
school committee.
committee.
Oh, so do it the 10th. Monday night.
I could do Monday night.
Is there anybody has a problem with the 10th of January?
No, I can do the 10th.
Okay. Everybody will do this, or begin at least, the criteria on the January 10th. Okay?
Yep.
So just to be clear, we're just asking people to
They have-
propose the criteria in B. We're not asking them to color the
No.
boxes.
Right, we're gonna go through the boxes on the 10th,
After the 10th.
on the 10th.
On the 10th.
Yeah.
Are we
so
gonna, are we
We're
gonna,
gonna fill,
we
we're
can
gonna fill
review
the boxes
criteria.
in on the 10th. We're gonna
We're gonna
fill the
fill in
boxes in.
boxes on the 10th. Before that, if people have additional criteria, email Shane.
Right. So by the time we get to the 10th, all the criteria are listed. And at that point, if someone wants to argue to remove one, fine, but at least they're all there.
So I would also suggest that the design team takes like under building optimal solar orientation for classrooms and fills that one in,
Yeah, we can't do that.
because they're gonna know that more than we are.
Right, and they can do
Let them
that.
fill it into red, green, and yellows. They should take some that only they know, right? That
Right. Yeah, building
And-
systems efficiency, building envelope efficiency. I mean, we can't answer those questions.
Yep. So why don't we do this? We'll take the first pass at the colors of the ones that we know are not necessarily debatable at this point and resend it to Shane for distribution. And then you can use that as your starting point.
That'd be excellent. Thank
Good.
you.
Okay, great.
All right.
All right, thank you.
so will we have everything we need, Helen, by the 10th to do that? Costs?
No,
we obviously have to discuss
Costs will
the
just
gym.
be, the costs will just be rolling in. So
Yeah,
we
so we
won't
don't
have
need
that
cost.
data
I
yet.
don't think we need costs
yeah.
to fill these in.
Okay, so the
Correct.
10th will be the preliminary, and we may have to revisit it on the 13th
Yeah.
and the 27th. Yeah.
Right, we can always fill in the cost if that's not there yet.
Okay,
Okay.
That won't take 2 hours.
all right, so I'll email this out as an Excel spreadsheet, and people can add or edit the criteria as necessary.
Okay.
Is that at 7 o'clock?
Yep.
7 o'clock on the 10th.
What's next?
You all done, Helen?
Yes, I am.
And more.
So just go back to my screen now. So we just wanted to, talking about costs, just start looking at some of the other schools that are in the MSBA program right now, so we can get a sort of idea of what schools are costing. It's a little bit difficult to see the spreadsheet. So I've just put together a list of about 12 or 15 school projects that are in the MSBA program right now. You can see the schools up here on top, starting at Saugus, which is the town right next door that bid in 2019, so a little over 2.5 years ago, right up to some of the schools in the program now. Watertown is a little bit further ahead than where Wakefield is. I've listed the module they're in. So module 3, 4, 5 being feasibility schematic, module 6 being a detailed design after the project is approved, module 7 being construction, and module 8 being in the closeout phase. Listed the grade configurations. These are all high schools. Listed the enrollment numbers, and I've also listed whether they were new construction or addition reno. So just going through the preferred schematic, that's after the second submission to MSBA. That's the submission we'll be making in May of next year. You go to the board, and that's where they approve the final design scope to bring forward to schematic. After schematic, you go back to the MSBA board. That's when they approve the project, and that's when the town will go to get their funding approval also to bring the project into detailed design and construction. And then finally, you have the bidding. So what are schools costing nowadays? The chart you can kind of see here back in 2017, 2018, there were, $400 and something, $500 a square foot. That's increased over the last few years, between 700. Some of them are still at 500, 600. So I think the average high school right now is costing somewhere between $580 and $600 a square foot. These are all ahead of our project. So when you add in inflation and escalation, we're probably at about $600 a square foot based on other projects that MSBA have done. I included a chart from MSBA's website. I'm going to try and pull up the live one, see if this works. Can people see that chart? So this is all on MSBA's website. They chart all the schools that are in their pipeline, whether they're in schematic, whether they're in construction, and whether they're closed out. So looking at that, you can see the projects. This goes back to 2010, 2011. Costs have steadily increased over the last number of years, and especially in the last 2 years, you can see the trajectory of the costs here. This orange line represents new construction, and this purple line represents ad reno. Just what's interesting in this, you can see there was a gap, certainly in 2016, between new construction and ad reno, but as of around 2020, there's really no difference in the costs of renovation and new construction. Probably a lot to do with the code changes, bringing buildings up to energy efficiency. But right now, what we're seeing is there's not a lot of difference between ad reno and new construction. These projects represent schools that are in design. Right now, these are due to bid in 2020, 2023. You can see some of the least expensive are $430, right up to $825, $800. Our school will not be in the 800s, but certainly it'll be somewhere in here. As I mentioned, $600 is probably in the median, is the line here. Half of them are over 600, half are under. So that's sort of where we are with MSBA now. Just wanted to try and do this, see if this works. just interesting here. So again, that orange line represents new construction. This purple line represents ad reno. This green line represents what MSBA reimburses. So you can see MSBA have steadily increased their reimbursement over the years. In June of this year, it went from $333 a square foot up to $360. What this also represents is that schools cost a lot more than what MSBA is reimbursing. And no schools are costing $360 a square foot. They're up around the $600 a square foot. So when it comes to reimbursement, that reimbursement is the same for every school in the MSBA program. Everywhere in Massachusetts, $360 does not represent what school construction should cost and is costing right now. So that's just a snapshot. MSBA's website does have a ton of information on school costs, elementary, middle school, and high schools, but just wanted to give people an idea of where they are at the moment. I think, Helen, you guys are going to submit the information to the estimators in the next couple of weeks. And as we said, we'll have some costs specific to our project back probably the middle of January to look at those as part of the criteria. But that's where we are right now. We're up around $600 a square foot. Obviously, the variables are site, any abnormal conditions, wetlands, ledge, both of which we know have on our site. Some of the designs, geothermal, if we look at that, is more expensive. Energy efficiency measures, PV can add to the costs. So those are some of the costs that can add. But just wanted to give people a sort of overview of where school construction costs are at the moment.
Any questions?
Yeah, and there's no, this was asked, and I know Chip said what he said, but like there's no indication on any of those 8 models of what its estimated costs are based on averages. Like I find like, you know, yeah, we want a high school, it doesn't matter the cost, so we want to explore the options, but you know, I want a Ferrari, but I'm not going to walk into a dealership because I just can't afford it. So like, you know, like, is there any matrix capability to give us some estimated costs to the options?
We will do that. So at this point, you know, we'll go to our professional estimators who will put costs together, but they'll be able to put a square foot cost against the size of the building, and then they'll have to look at any of those sort of abnormal costs. You know, got to do with the site work. You know, a big cost will be if we build a building on the Beasley Oval, we're going to have to replace that track and field somewhere, right? That's going to be a big cost. So that will be considered, you know, a normal cost, and we'll pull that out and show that separately.
And we don't want that in this matrix. Is that not the intent of this matrix that we're going over on the 10th, that we don't need that for that meeting on the 10th?
Well, if we don't have that on the 10th, Philip, I think we'll certainly revisit on the 13th or a later meeting before we finalize the reduction of those options to bring forward to PSR.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
I guess this John, I'm just wondering if on all the different, you know, 1A, 2A, 2B, all those different scenarios we were looking at, would it be simple enough to just give as one of the bullet points on there and resend it out? Like, what is the square footage of each of these options that we're looking at? Because then, you know, we could use that $600 in our head just to have an idea if these things are, you know, drastically different in square footage at this early stage. That could, you know, maybe drive some people to think differently.
We're finalizing that program right now. We're hoping to have that done by the holidays, and that's what will go to the estimators, and they'll do that exercise. John,
okay,
taking the square footage and applying an order of magnitude cost to those. So
I want to caution
do
you
that.
that the $600 a square foot is only construction costs. That's not the total project cost. So
Yeah, so
understood.
And isn't it safe to say that if the educational plan is the same in all of these scenarios, and there's an auditorium in all these scenarios, that the price is going to be pretty similar because it's going to be pretty similar square footage?
I think that
toggle on to that question, is the temp facilities, the modular facilities that the school has to fund, is that captured in the professional estimators?
That will be captured in the overall project cost, yes. If
Thank you.
there's, if this modular is required, we'll capture that cost.
Yeah, and that is a criteria currently on the matrix. But to go back to John's question, with the exception of the renovation to code only, the square footages should be, the overall square footage should be about the same across the board, except for perhaps model schools. And the only other variation there is renovation square footage versus new. But as we saw on that chart, there used to be a much bigger difference between the cost of renovated square footage versus new. They're pretty close. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And what is that approximate square footage, Helen, for all of these options?
We're still working on the space
Yeah,
summary.
it's-
No idea, no one knows?
When you plug,
yeah.
Somewhere in the 200,000 square foot range. Yeah.
And so if at $600 a square foot and the state is reimbursing $360, then the town pays $240 a square foot. Is that the math?
Well, we'll do that math for you because it's that's putting it simply, but it's a little more complicated than that.
It is,
Yeah.
but.
No, we get a,
No, we don't get
Never-
60%. We get about 45%.
Because, as we've discussed, that square footage will include central office, it will include WCAT, and none of that will be reimbursed. We have to figure out the gymnasium or the field house as well. Some of that will not be reimbursed. So we'll do that, and we'll publish those estimates when we get them from the estimators.
our last percentage was for the last project for the Greenwood, we had 49.4% of reimbursable cost.
So right now we're 49.94. But that's, as Joe said, that's reimbursable costs. Not everything is reimbursable.
Right.
Any other questions? All right, Shane, anything else?
No, that's it. So we'll update the meeting schedule and update the website for next meeting on January 10th.
All right, and everybody, if they have a criteria to add, please send it to Shane and they'll get it in there and we'll have a discussion on the 10th, just on this criteria and this chart alone. That's all we're going to be talking about. If there's nothing else, everybody have a great holiday and click leave meeting.